I'm Natalie Chen, 29, a pastry chef and the niece nobody ever took seriously. The air inside the cafe was warm with cinnamon, espresso, and nostalgia. Everyone called it Leo's after my uncle. Of course, it wasn't his cafe technically, but he treated it like his kingdom. He sat at the back corner booth every Friday, talking loudly, sipping his double-shot Americano, and telling anyone who'd listen how he could have been a Michelin-starred chef if he hadn't chosen family over fame. This Friday, the leather seat at the corner creaked under his weight as usual. He was halfway through one of his legendary stories about showing Gordon Ramsay how to properly plate a coq au vin when I entered. But this time, I wasn't there for a croissant or small talk. I was there to sign papers. The hostess barely glanced at me. "Takeout," she asked, eyes on the iPad. I shook my head. "Actually, I'm wait outside. We're full." She pointed at the door without looking up. The glass door behind me reflected a pale, They all nodded as if that explained everything. Then the door to the back opened. A tall man in a gray blazer walked out, holding a clipboard. His face lit up when he saw me. "There you are, Ms. Chen," he said, striding forward. "We're ready in the office." The barista froze, mid-pour. The hostess dropped her iPad. My uncle looked up. For a moment, his mouth hung open mid-sentence. He squinted at the man in the blazer. "Who's she signing something with?" The man turned to him. "Ms. Chen is the new owner. Papers just came through this morning." A full beat of silence passed. Then chairs scraped. Customers looked up. Leo's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. I turned slightly toward the camera. If you're watching this and you've ever had someone laugh in your face when you told them your dream, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're from, what you're building. And hey, if your family drama's ever driven you further than love could, hit that like button and subscribe. You're not alone. Leo stood slowly, disbelief still hanging on his face. You bought my cafe?" I smiled. "No, Uncle. I bought this cafe." The barista's jaw dropped. The busboy muttered, "Oh my God." Leo looked around like the walls might confirm this was a prank. "You can't be serious." I didn't respond. The moment was already doing the talking. The silence didn't last. It cracked, splintered by the sound of my uncle's laugh. Not the amused kind, the sharp, disbelieving chuckle of someone who thinks the universe just made a clerical error. "You can't just walk in here," and he gestured broadly to the espresso machines, the clinking glasses. The stack of branded menus claim this. This is my spot. Everyone knows this is my place. I walked past the stunned hostess and made my way toward the office behind the counter. "You might want to check the new deed posted by the door," I said, without turning back. As I slipped through the swinging door and entered the cramped office space, the manager, an older woman named Trina with thick glasses and a clipboard, smiled warmly. "All signed and filed. Natalie," she said, "I know it'll take a few weeks to update the branding, but starting Monday, this will be yours, in name and in flavor." I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath since walking through the front door. "Thanks, Trina. I'm not looking to tear anything down. I just want it to reflect what it should have been all along." She nodded. "And I assume your uncle wasn't aware." I gave a small, Ironic smile. He was the reason I kept the sale private. When I stepped back into the dining area, I noticed that Leo hadn't moved. He was still at his booth, but now his back was rigid and his jaw clenched. The energy had shifted. Regulars stared at me, some whispering. One woman even pulled out her phone, no doubt posting something on the neighborhood forum. I walked straight up to him. He looked me up and down like he still didn't believe it. "You're serious?" "Huh," he said. "Dead serious." His voice dropped. Bitter. "You used to come here begging me for feedback on your dry little cupcakes." "They weren't dry," I said evenly. He leaned forward. "You had no idea what you were doing back then. I saved you the embarrassment of wasting your money. No, you just didn't want to be outshined," I said quietly. He scoffed, like the idea was so beneath him it didn't deserve a response. "You asked me for $10,000. Natalie, 10. I've got cars that cost more than that. You think I was going to hand over money for some cutesy dream with frosting? I wasn't asking for a handout. I came to you with a plan, a spreadsheet, recipes, even a commercial kitchen rental proposal. I needed backing, not condescension." Leo sat back, arms folded. "You're welcome, by the way." "For what? For toughening you up? If I'd said yes, you wouldn't have done whatever it is you did to get the cash." I stared at him. He wasn't joking. He actually believed that dismissing me, laughing in my face, and treating me like a joke had somehow helped me. "I didn't become successful because you turned me down," I said. "I became successful in spite of it." Trina called from behind the counter. "Natalie, the supplier just dropped off next week's flower shipment. Want me to sign I turned?" "No, I'll handle it." Leo's eyes narrowed. "You're going to change the menu, aren't you? I'm going to elevate it." "You mean ruin it?" "No, I mean give people more than just pre-bought muffins and frozen quiches." I leveled my gaze at him. "You've coasted on your personality and old stories. I want to give them something that actually tastes like effort." He opened his mouth, closed it again. I left him sitting there and stepped out to the alley, where the supplier truck was idling. The delivery guy handed me a receipt. I signed it with steady hands. When I came back inside, Leo was gone. That night, I stayed behind after hours, walking the floor, touching each chair, each table, each frame on the wall. This place had so many layers: the crust of routine, the dust of pride, the fading photographs of Leo shaking hands with chefs who probably never remembered his name. I wasn't here to erase him, but I would no longer be erased by him either. The story didn't start here, of course. It started 3 years ago in a tiny, leaky apartment in Denver, where I worked the morning shift at a grocery bakery and made custom cakes from my kitchenette at night. I had just finished culinary school through a scholarship. Leo was the only person in the family with any experience in food service, and I thought foolishly that he'd be proud, that he'd help, that he'd see me as someone walking in his footsteps, not stepping on his shadow. I still remember sitting across from him in that same cafe, folder in hand, filled with my printed menu and product costs. He had laughed. "You think people will pay $6 for a scone made by someone nobody's heard of, sweetheart? Even I couldn't charge that. And people know me." That laugh had lingered in my chest like smoke after a fire. I left the cafe with my folder clenched so tight my fingers hurt. For 2 months, I cried every time I saw someone posting their homemade baking business online. But crying didn't pay rent. I worked overtime. I catered school events. I sold holiday cookie boxes. I networked with food bloggers. I used my tax return to buy a booth at the local food fair. And that's where everything changed. A local anchor featured me in a 2-minute segment, and my orders tripled overnight. Within 9 months, I had a wait list. Within 18, I had a Kickstarter campaign that surpassed its goal in 48 hours. I used every cent wisely: equipment, permits, brand design. I didn't rush into a storefront. I partnered with a ghost kitchen. My cinnamon rolls were on 4 different food delivery apps. I became a brand not because someone gave me permission, but because no one could ignore the numbers. The offer for the cafe came out of nowhere. One of the silent partners was moving overseas and wanted out. They reached out to me after trying my pastries at a charity event. At first, I hesitated, but when they sent me the name and address, I knew I wouldn't just be owning a cafe. I'd be reclaiming a stage that was once used to humiliate me. 3 weeks after I signed the papers, Leo stopped showing up. The regulars noticed. Some asked if he'd been banned. I told them the truth: he was always welcome. But pride has a way of tasting worse than defeat. On the first Monday of my soft rebrand, I introduced 3 new items to the menu. All fresh, all mine. All using the techniques I had studied while everyone thought I was wasting my 20s. A young woman with a toddler came in. She looked nervous. "Sorry," she said. "I heard this place has new owners. My son loved the old blueberry muffins." I handed her a sample of mine. She tasted it. Her eyes widened. This is so much better." The little boy beamed as he bit into it. Outside, the awning still said Leo's, but not for long. By Friday, word had spread. The cafe was full again, but this time for something new. Not Leo's stories, not his handshake antics or exaggerated past, but the scent of browned butter, cardamom, and oven-crisped croissants that melted into silence on the tongue. I wore my apron for the first time in the front of house, not tucked away in the kitchen, not boxed into the corners like I had been as a girl baking sheet cakes in the shadows, but front and center, greeting customers. Many didn't recognize me. Some assumed I was a hired baker. But the ones who stayed long enough to taste, to talk, to look up and meet my eyes, they began to understand. "Natalie," a voice said near the register. As in, Leo's niece. I turned. It was Mr. Granger, one of my uncle's old friends, balding with a houndstooth coat and a wallet that snapped like a trap. He always ordered black coffee, no sugar, and left exact change. "That's me," I said, keeping my tone light. He glanced at the menu board, frowning. "I noticed the spinach quiche is gone. It's still here. Just not from the freezer anymore." He raised a brow. "You're welcome to try a slice. On the house," I offered. "Made it myself this morning." He eyed me like I was a foreign ingredient in his otherwise familiar meal, but eventually he nodded and sat down. 10 minutes later, he was back at the counter. "I'll take another slice. And 2 of those chocolate sea salt tarts?" I smiled. "Coming right up." In the far corner, I spotted someone standing alone, arms crossed. My uncle. No coffee, no grin, just watching, like a ghost revisiting a house that no longer remembered him. He didn't sit, he didn't order, but he stayed. That night, as I closed the shutters and wiped down the espresso bar, Trina joined me with 2 mugs of warm chai. "He came in through the back earlier," she said, handing me a mug. "Didn't say much. Just looked around like he was reading a will." I sipped the chai, letting it settle the knot in my throat. I didn't want to humiliate him. I just needed to prove I wasn't nothing. "You didn't prove anything to him, sweetheart," she said gently. "You proved it to yourself." I didn't reply. I wasn't ready for lessons. Not yet. The next morning, a knock rattled the back door. I expected the flower guy. Instead, I found Leo. He stood there like the wind had pushed him rather than his own legs. His coat was wrinkled, His eyes darted past me into the kitchen, the walls, the floor tiles. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice rough. I stepped aside. He didn't speak right away, just walked the perimeter, touched the edge of the prep table, ran a finger along the flower shelf. Then he turned to me. "I didn't know you were this serious," he said. "I thought it was just a hobby." "That's because you never asked," I replied. He flinched slightly. "I didn't think you had it in you." "That's because you never looked." He sighed, heavy. "You were always quiet, polite." I thought, maybe you weren't cut out for the business? I stared. "You mean your kind of business? Loud? Crude? Braggy?" He chuckled, a little more genuine now. "Yeah, maybe." We stood in the hum of the refrigerator fans and ticking ovens. No customers, no performance. He looked down at the flour-dusted floor. "I was wrong." I blinked. "I should have helped you," he said. "Back then. I didn't want to see you get crushed. Or worse, surpass me." It hung in the air like steam, the one thing he'd never say out loud. "Surpass me. I'm not here to beat you, Uncle," I said. "I just wanted to belong." He leaned against the wall, then laughed softly. "Well, you own the place now. That's a hell of a way to belong." We stood in a fragile pause. Then I asked, "Do you want to try something?" He looked surprised. "You offering me your food now?" I handed him a fresh passion fruit tart from the fridge, still chilled with piped meringue peaks. He took a bite, then another. His face softened. "It's good," he said. "Thanks." He looked at me. Better than I ever made. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there. Two bakers, separated by ego and time, but suddenly, not so far apart. A week later, I rebranded the cafe. I didn't name it after myself. That would have been too loud, too final. I called it Sift Clean, elegant, a nod to flower, to process, to care. The sign was subtle, the new menu, even subtler. Leo didn't return to the corner booth. He didn't need to. But he did stop by once a week. Never stayed long. Always ordered something new. One afternoon, I caught him scribbling notes on a napkin after trying my seasonal almond pear tart. "Are you copying my recipe?" I asked with a smirk. "Just appreciating," he replied. "In case I open something again. You know, in Florida or something." "You mean a retirement hobby?" "Hey, don't get cocky." But I saw the flicker of pride in his eyes. One evening, after the last customer left, I sat alone at the booth that used to be his. I looked around at the warm lights, the laughter still lingering in the corners, the plates scraped clean by people who didn't care where I trained, just that the food felt like home. And in that silence, I remembered every night I cried over burnt bread. Every time I'd been told no by someone who thought kindness was weakness. Every second of doubt. But also every moment I stayed. Every hour I kneaded, tested, packed orders by hand. Every time I chose to believe that being underestimated wasn't the end of the story, just the quiet before the rise. This cafe wasn't revenge. It was recovery. It wasn't about proving Leo wrong. It was about becoming someone I didn't need his permission to be. And as the street lamps glowed outside and the mixer hummed softly in the back, I finally felt full. It was sometime in December, right before Christmas, when a woman came in with a clipboard and a confused look. She wore a navy blue coat with gold buttons and a badge that shimmered under the warm cafe lights. "I'm here on behalf of the Small Business Restoration Grant Committee," she said, glancing at the line forming behind her. "Is the owner available?" I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped out from behind the counter. "That's me." She blinked. "You're Natalie Chen." "Yes." She paused, scanning my face like I might be lying. You're younger than I expected. I tilted my head. I get that a lot. She recovered quickly. I've been sent to verify your operations before we process the final installment of the grant. You were recommended for a feature in the city's holiday revitalization spotlight. Now it was my turn to blink. Wait, spotlight. She nodded. Apparently, a few locals submitted your name. One of them included a letter from an old friend in the culinary scene, a Leo Mateo. I smiled. Slowly. Of course he did. She stepped aside, surveying the layout of the cafe, the tables filled with families. A couple sharing hot chocolate and whispering over a shared slice of ginger cake. The golden lights casting soft halos over each plate. Everything smelled like orange zest, cloves, and browned butter. You've turned this place around, she said, checking off a few boxes on her clipboard. I didn't answer right away. I just looked out at the cafe. My cafe, and realized how little of Leo's shadow still lingered. It wasn't that I'd erased it. I'd just let mine grow. After she left, I went back to the kitchen where Trina was decorating Yule logs. Did you know Leo wrote a letter for us? I asked. Trina, without looking up, said. He slipped it under the door 2 weeks ago. I read it. Almost cried. I waited. He said he never had a daughter. She continued, voice softer now. But if he had, he would have wanted her to bake like you. My hand froze on the icing bag. The week before Christmas was our busiest yet. We had to close orders 4 days early, and customers still lined up around the corner. I worked 16 hours a day, sometimes more, and every time I thought I couldn't keep going, someone would smile after tasting something and say, "This is the best thing I've had all year." Somehow, it made the blisters worth it. On Christmas Eve, just before closing, Leo came in. He wore a gray coat and carried a paper bag under his arm. Thought you'd be closed by now, he said. Almost. We're doing last pickups. He handed me the bag. It's for you. Inside was a hand-bound recipe journal. The pages were filled, not printed, not typed, but handwritten. Neat script. His script. These are mine, he said, the ones I never gave anyone. I turned a page. Bolognese from scratch. Another pecan tarts with sea salt bourbon glaze. I figured, he added, you'd make them better than I ever did. I won't steal them, I said quickly. They're yours. They're ours now. He didn't stay long, just enough to see the way the cafe looked at dusk lights twinkling in the windows, a child giggling by the cookie stand, the soft murmur of carols humming from the speakers. As he turned to leave, I called out, Uncle. He stopped. I'm not angry anymore. He nodded, but didn't turn around. That's good, he said. I'm proud now. Then he walked out into the cold. The new year brought changes, not flashy ones, subtle evolutions. I hired a new pastry assistant, a quiet girl named Layla, who reminded me of myself at 22, observant, meticulous, constantly scribbling notes and too shy to ask questions. I mentored her the way no one had mentored me. We expanded the menu, adding seasonal specials and customer-named favorites. One was a buttery blackberry lavender tart I named Aunt Ruth's Garden after a customer who used to bring me fresh herbs every Friday. A food blogger with over 500,000 followers did a piece on our evolution from local haunt to quiet culinary gem. Orders spiked. We trended on 2 apps for over a week, and yet none of that felt as surreal as the day Leo came in with a visitor. This is her, he told the woman beside him, the one I was telling you about. The woman wore a red cashmere scarf and held a leather-bound notebook. Natalie Chen, she said, shaking my hand. We're launching a series on culinary legacies, old chefs, and the young talents they eventually admitted were better. I laughed, glancing at Leo. Sounds humbling? He shrugged. Maybe I'm finally learning how to do that. They stayed for 2 hours. I made fresh brioche and poured them small glasses of mulled cider. At one point, Leo looked around the cafe and said, "You know what's funny?" I raised an eyebrow. I thought building a legacy meant putting your name on everything. Turns out it just meant not getting in the way of someone else's. In March, I hosted our first after-hours baking workshop. 10 seats only. I expected silence, awkward questions, and maybe 1 or 2 actual successes. Instead, I got laughter, friendship, butter smudged on aprons and people taking selfies next to the ovens. We made lemon rose scones and rosemary shortbread. I told them the truth that my first scones were inedible, and my first cake sank like a stone. They laughed. They asked questions. They told me their failures. Too. One woman said, "It's wild how a place like this can make you feel like things can turn out okay." That night, as I turned off the lights, I walked past the old corner booth. It still creaked when you sat down. I hadn't replaced it. Some ghosts aren't meant to be banished. They're meant to remind you of what you've outgrown. Months passed. Summer brought open windows and iced chai lattes. Fall brought chai snickerdoodles and pumpkin financiers. And eventually, the holidays came around again. I stood in the cafe 1 year to the day after I walked through the door as its new owner. A customer walked in, a man I didn't recognize, and asked, "Is Leo here today?" I shook my head. He visits. Not as often as he used to. He used to talk about this place like it was his child. I smiled. It sort of is. But kids grow up. They become their own thing. He nodded, took his coffee, and sat near the window. That night, I changed the sign on the front door for the first time in a year. It had read SIFT. Now it read, "Sift rooted in love, baked in defiance." It felt right. Not angry, not loud, just honest. As I locked up and stood alone on the sidewalk, I thought about the girl who once begged for $10,000 just to get a chance. She didn't need the money. She needed the silence to break. And she'd done that not by screaming, but by baking, by staying, by becoming. Spring melted into summer again, and with it came the anniversaries. 1 year since the rebrand. 1 year since the deed changed hands. 1 year since I stopped waiting for approval and started living as if I didn't need it. The cafe had become more than just a business. It was a living thing now. The regulars had their favorite tables. The baristas knew their orders by heart. And the old walls no longer echoed with someone else's voice. The energy had changed. People lingered longer. They laughed more. Some came just to sit quietly with a pastry and breathe. One Tuesday morning, I arrived early to prep the cinnamon brioche. The sky was still the color of steel, and the streets hadn't yet shaken off their sleep. I unlocked the front door and noticed a small envelope taped to the glass. Just below the SIFT sign, it read, in thin, slanted handwriting for Natalie from the one who couldn't see past himself. Inside was a letter. "Natalie, I won't take up too many words. I spent too many of them on myself over the years and not enough listening to others. I know now that I failed you when you needed support the most. I thought I was protecting you from failure. But the truth is, I was protecting myself from irrelevance. Watching what you've built, not just the food, but the feeling in this place. It's made me understand what I never managed to create. Not really. I built something loud. You built something that lasts. You didn't become better than me. You became someone I never had the courage to be. I'm stepping back now. For good. I'm moving to Clearwater to be near some old friends. I've donated all my old cookbooks to the local library there, except one. The one with your first sugar cookie recipe still taped inside. I'm leaving it here, in the box beneath your booth. I figured you'd understand the meaning. Leo. I folded the letter carefully, pressing the crease slowly with my thumb. It didn't undo the years. It didn't erase the silence or the sting of being mocked. But it was real, honest. And it felt like closure, not a slamming door, but a gentle one clicking shut behind someone who finally decided to let go. When I unlocked the booth storage under the old seat, the one Leo used to claim like a throne, there it was. A battered leather binder, fraying at the edges, with hundreds of slips and notes and flour-dusted corners, and near the front a yellowed recipe card. My handwriting clumsy, the ink slightly smeared. Natalie's soft sugar cookies. Don't burn them this time. I smiled. I didn't cry, but I sat in that booth with the binder in my lap, just breathing. A few months later, I got an email from a publisher. One of our customers, a travel food writer, had submitted a pitch on my behalf, complete with photos, reviews, and an outline of what she called a memoir in flavors. The offer was generous, too generous, I thought at first. But something in me had shifted. I no longer flinched when recognized, no longer downplayed what I'd done. I said yes. Hands that shape us, including the ones that tried to push us down, only to make us stronger. When the book launched, we held a quiet party at the cafe. No press, no speeches, just candlelight, soft music, and trays of the recipes from the final chapter. A woman came up to me, holding the book to her chest. I bought this because I thought it would be about baking, she said. But I didn't expect it to be about me. I tilted my head. My dad used to tell me I was too sensitive to run my own business, that I'd crumble if anyone criticized me. But reading this, I realized maybe being sensitive is what makes you pay attention to texture, to people, to pain. I nodded, quietly. Thank you for writing it, she added. And I realized then the story I'd told to survive had become a story that helped someone else begin. By the second spring since I'd taken over the cafe, our city had changed. More small businesses were opening, people were walking again, laughing again, staying for longer coffees and longer conversations. I began seeing familiar faces from the early days, customers who used to keep their heads down, now bringing friends, children, even dates. One afternoon, a young man approached the counter with a shaky smile. "Hey," he said. I don't know if you remember me, but I applied here a year ago and didn't get the job. You told me to keep baking. I did. I just got accepted into the pastry program at the Culinary Institute." I grinned. "That's incredible." He laughed nervously. "I don't think I would have even applied if you hadn't looked me in the eye and said I had something. Everyone has something." I replied. "Most people just need someone else to see it first." As he left, I thought about how I used to dread being seen, how invisibility felt safer. But now being seen didn't feel like exposure. It felt like arrival. One evening in early June, I stood outside the cafe just before sunset. The streetlights flickered on, and the window reflected the sign, "Sift rooted in love, baked in defiance." I thought about changing it again, maybe to reflect something more peaceful, something gentler. But the truth was, that defiance wasn't bitterness anymore. It was boundary. It was survival. It was pride, not the arrogant kind, but the solid kind that stands on both feet and says, I was here. I made something. I didn't wait for permission. I walked back inside. Layla was mopping. Trina was laughing in the back. A teenage couple sat holding hands over half-eaten tiramisu, their fingers brushing crumbs across the table. Everything was soft. Everything was glowing. And I was still here. Not as someone's niece, not as someone's backup plan, but as myself. The summer unfolded like rising dough, slow, warm, and full of hidden expansion. Business was steady. Reviews came in weekly, and people from outside the city began making day trips just to try our peach basil turnovers and black sesame cream puffs. But the success wasn't what stayed with me. It was the stillness, the quiet steadiness of belonging not to people, but to a purpose. One late afternoon, during a sudden thunderstorm, a middle-aged man burst through the cafe doors, soaked to the bone, shaking off his coat. He looked around, breathless. Sorry. He panted. I didn't know where else to go. I recognized him. His name was Daniel, a lawyer who worked 2 blocks over and used to meet clients at Leo's years ago. Rough day, I asked. He collapsed into a chair. My mother passed away this morning. I stilled. I didn't even think. He continued. I just walked here. Something about this place. He didn't need to finish. I understood. We all walk back to where warmth once lived when grief cracks something open. I brought him a slice of the lemon chamomile cake I'd baked that morning. He ate in silence. Later, as the rain slowed, he said, This place, it's not like it used to be. But somehow, it still feels like home, only quieter, more honest. That night, I wrote his mother's name in our guest ledger, not because she'd visited, but because she'd been remembered here. That was enough. A few weeks later, Layla approached me at closing. She held a sketchbook in her hands. I want to apply to the International Pastry Program in Paris, she said. I looked at her. She couldn't have been older than 22, but she already moved like a chef, efficient, composed, quietly passionate. You should, I said. I wouldn't have even dreamed of it if I hadn't worked here. I paused, studying her. You did the work? I replied. You earned the dream. She bit her lip. But if I leave, you won't be leaving. You'll be expanding. She grinned then, the kind of grin you can't fake. The kind that's half disbelief, half fire. I offered her a reference letter. A week later, she got in. When she hugged me goodbye at the airport, I remembered my own beginning. The Denver apartment, the silence, the rejection, and then the rise. Cycles don't repeat. They evolve. And she was part of mine. In early autumn, the publisher called again. The book had been nominated for an independent culinary award. I laughed when they told me. It felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. But then the emails came in. The letters. Messages from single mothers, exhausted artists, bakery students, and retired teachers who had read my story and saw their own fear in it. One letter stood out. Dear Natalie, I'm 68. I've worked my whole life, mostly behind a desk, always thinking the best parts of me were too quiet to matter. Your story didn't just inspire me, it woke me up. I've started baking again. My kids are confused, but I feel alive for the first time in years. Thank you for being brave enough to write it. I pinned it above my prep station, not for validation, but to remember that every ounce of pain, of embarrassment, of dismissal I'd endured had turned into something edible, something shared. And that was the point. Not revenge, Not fame, just communion. One October morning, as I sipped my coffee in the back office, Trina walked in holding an envelope. "It's from Clearwater," she said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a postcard. On the front, a photo of a beach cafe with seafoam chairs and a sandwich board that read, "Try the key lime pie." Inspired by the best baker I know, she knows who she is. No name, no signature. Just that. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. Leo had found his own rhythm. At last. Winter returned. Softer this time. I hired a second pastry chef to keep up with orders. We launched a new line of memory bakes. Customers could submit childhood recipes, and we'd recreate them with a modern twist. It was a hit. One older woman submitted a recipe for lost love cinnamon rolls named after the boy she never married, who had proposed over a batch of them. We recreated the rolls, dusted with rose sugar and a hint of black pepper. When she took a bite, she closed her eyes and whispered, "There he is." I nearly cried on the spot. Food remembers, even when people forget. On the anniversary of the cafe's rebrand, we held a quiet celebration. No speeches, no cameras, just the regulars, the staff, and a long, communal table filled with candlelight and shared dishes. One chair at the end remained empty. Midway through the evening, Leo walked in. He looked thinner, older, but peaceful. He didn't sit in the old corner booth. He sat next to Trina, complimented the cassis pear tart, and helped pour cider for the newcomers. No one gasped. No one stared. He was just another person in the story now, no longer the star. And he didn't seem to mind. As the night wore on, he raised a glass. "To second chances," he said. Then, looking at me, added, "Especially the ones we don't deserve but get anyway." I didn't toast back. I just nodded. That was enough. When I closed the cafe that night, I didn't linger. I didn't press my hand to the wall like I used to. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I walked out, coat wrapped tight, air crisp and silent around me, behind me, through the window. The cafe glowed not because I was in it, but because I'd built something that could shine even without me. Not every story ends with applause. Sometimes it ends with light, with peace, with a recipe passed down quietly, a door left open, a name remembered, a chair left empty, just in case someone returns, and me, no longer asking for permission to begin, just beginning, again and again.